I slept with my married boss 200 times, now my fiancé's gone like I never existed. Chapter 1, The Lie I Told Myself. They all want to paint me as the villain. But I know this story is more complicated than that. My name is Abigail. I'm 28 and apparently I've become that woman, the one who cheated on her fiancé with her married boss. Over 200 times they say, like they're counting sins in a ledger. But numbers don't tell the full story. Feelings do. Reed and I had been together for 4 years. Engaged for 3 months. And for most of that time I tried, truly tried, to make it feel like love. He was the perfect man on paper. Thoughtful. Sweet. Always trying to please me with romantic gestures, surprise dinners, handwritten notes. And maybe that's what drove me away. It all felt manufactured. Like I was dating a character he thought I wanted instead of a real person. I started dreading our weekends together. Every routine check-in, every "how was your day?" just reminded me how numb I felt. Then Dion walked into my life, my boss. Mid-40s. Confident. Married. And everything Reed wasn't. When Dion looked at me, I didn't feel adored. I felt seen. He didn't try to impress me with perfect boyfriend antics. He challenged me. Respected me. Made me feel alive again. Reed gave me comfort, but Dion gave me fire. It started with late nights at the office. Casual touches. Inside jokes. Lingering glances. Reed would be at home texting me "miss you," while I was in Dion's office, laughing in a way I hadn't in years. And one night, in the quiet hum of fluorescent lights and half-finished reports, Dion looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that made sense. He leaned in, slow and deliberate, and kissed me like it was inevitable. I didn't flinch. I didn't pull away. Because in that moment I wasn't thinking about Reed or right or wrong. I was just thinking about how easy it was to let go of everything I thought I wanted. Chapter 2, When Comfort Turned into a Cage. After that first kiss there was no going back. Not in my mind, not in my body. It was like something had snapped loose inside me. Dion didn't even need to say anything. The look we exchanged afterward said enough. We both knew what door we just opened. And neither of us had any real intention of closing it. The next day I came home to Reed cooking dinner. Candlelight. Music. My favorite wine already breathing on the counter. He looked so proud of himself, like he'd planned a moment he thought would impress me. I smiled. I even kissed him. But inside I felt nothing. Just this dull, polite gratitude mixed with a strange sort of resentment, because he had no idea that while he was busy creating his perfect little life, I had already stepped out of it. Dion started making it easy. Hotel rooms. Discreet meetups. Always scheduled around work so that no one would suspect a thing. It was thrilling at first, the lies, the secrecy, the control. Reed would text me something sweet and I'd be in the back seat of Dion's car, undoing buttons I used to keep fastened out of loyalty. And the guilt? It never hit me the way people expect. If anything, lying to Reed started to feel like freedom. Like I was reclaiming something that had been buried beneath all his well-meaning gestures and suffocating predictability. He was so good. Too good. Like a man who thought love was a checklist he could complete with flowers and forehead kisses. He'd say things like, "Whatever you need, I'll give it to you," and all I could think was, what I need is to feel something again. The more Dion and I saw each other, the more I began resenting Reed for not noticing how far I was drifting. He tries so hard. Weekend trips, surprise date nights, conversations about honeymoon destinations. And all of it just reminded me how fake I'd become. I didn't even recognize the woman sitting across from him anymore. One night we were watching a movie on the couch, some romantic comedy he'd picked out just to make me smile, and I looked over at him and it hit me, he had no idea who I was. Not really. He loved a version of me that didn't exist anymore. And I was too far gone to get her back. I excused myself early that night, told him I was tired, went to bed pretending to sleep, while my phone lit up with a message from Dion. It simply read, "Rooms ready. Same place. Midnight." And without hesitation, I slid out of bed, grabbed my keys, and left behind the man who still believed I'd one day wear his ring down the aisle. Chapter 3, The Double Life. The hotel room became a world of its own, separate from the life I had with Reed. It smelled like leather and wine and risk. Dion always made sure the room was perfect. Dim lighting, thick curtains, fresh sheets like we were starring in our own little movie where no one could hurt or be hurt. And for a while, I let myself believe that. We met 2, sometimes 3 times a week. I'd tell Reed I was helping a friend, staying late for work, dealing with family. He never questioned me. He trusted me like a man who still believed he was the center of my universe. That blind faith only made the lying easier. The more Dion and I became entangled, the more I realized I didn't miss Reed. I missed who I used to be before I settled into the life everyone said I should want. Reed was stable. He was kind. He planned. He folded my laundry. And every time he did, I felt like a wind-up doll being placed back on a shelf after playtime. Dion, on the other hand, wasn't trying to fix me. He let me be difficult. Bull. He didn't flinch when I challenged him, didn't soften when I was sharp. And that made me feel real in a way I hadn't felt in years. I convinced myself I was managing it all well. That as long as Reed didn't know, I wasn't really hurting anyone. I still showed up to our engagement parties. Still smiled when he talked about our wedding playlist. Still wore the ring like it meant something. But inside, I was always waiting for the next message. The next rendezvous. The next escape from the life I never signed up for but kept pretending to want. One evening, Dion looked at me while we were lying in bed and he said, "You don't belong in that other world, Abigail. You never did." And the scariest part wasn't that he was wrong. It was that a part of me had already started believing he was right. Chapter 4. The confession that broke everything. The affair lasted over a year. By then, lying had become effortless, like breathing. Reed would make coffee every morning, kiss me on the forehead and ask how I slept. And I'd smile back with a warmth I'd learned to fake perfectly. But after Dion got promoted and relocated out of state, the rush began to fade. Without him, the silence was unbearable. The high was gone and I was left with Reed, who still loved me, who still tried. He noticed something was off. Started planning more surprise dates, leaving little love notes in my purse. And instead of making me feel cherished, it made my skin itch. I'd ruined everything and still he clung to this image of me that no longer existed. 3 months after Dion left, I cracked. I woke up one night next to Reed. He was sleeping peacefully, one arm draped across my waist, and I felt like I was suffocating. Not because of him, but because of the lie I'd been living for so long that I could no longer remember the last time I felt honest. I started crying quietly. I didn't mean to wake him, but he stirred and sat up. "What's wrong?" he whispered, reaching for me instinctively. And that's when I told him. Everything. I said Dion's name. I said it had been going on for over a year. I told him about the hotel, the messages, the hundreds of times I chose someone else over him and then came home like nothing happened. My voice broke, but I didn't stop. I wanted it out. All of it. Reed didn't yell. He didn't cry. He didn't even look shocked. He just stared at me. Like he was watching the house he'd spent 4 years building catch fire, and realizing he didn't have it in him to put out the flames. He asked questions. Calm, measured questions. Dates. Times. Details. And the more he asked, the more I found myself talking. Not to explain, not to justify, but because I was desperate for any reaction that would tell me he still cared. But Reed stayed quiet. And that silence hurt more than any scream ever could. Chapter 5. The man I never really knew. The days after I confessed were the quietest of my life. Reed didn't throw my things out. He didn't curse my name or rage at me. He went to work, came home, made dinner, sat beside me on the couch like nothing had changed, like we were both ghosts haunting the life we used to have. I tried to talk. Tried to explain how things had spiraled, how I'd felt empty for so long. How Dion had filled something in me that Reed never knew was missing. But Reed just listened, coldly, like a man interviewing his own betrayal. He never once asked me why. And I started to hate him for that. I needed a fight. I needed emotion. I needed him to care. But all I got was silence. He started making lists, bills, leases, what we'd each keep when we split. He made copies of keys. Changed passwords. He was unhooking me from his life like I was a virus he'd finally identified. That's when it hit me. Reed wasn't falling apart. He was moving on. Through mutual friends, I heard whispers. That he'd started going to therapy. That he got a promotion. That he was reconnecting with old friends. That there was a new girl, someone sweet, supportive. Everything I wasn't. And he never once called me. Never responded to the messages I sent late at night when the guilt was too loud to ignore. Never unblocked me. Never cracked. It was like I never existed. I ran into Dion once at a coffee shop downtown. I smiled. He didn't. He nodded like I was just another stranger waiting for her latte. No history. No fire. No heartbreak. And that's when I finally realized something. Chapter 6. The mirror I refused to face. That morning in the coffee shop, when Dion looked right through me like I was just another face in the crowd, I stood there frozen, holding on to a fantasy that had dissolved the moment it was no longer convenient for him. No smile. No nod. Just gone. Like Reed. And it hit me harder than anything else had. I had meant nothing to either of them. Not really. Dion got what he wanted and left. Reed took the truth I finally gave him and erased me like a mistake he refused to carry forward. And I was left with the mess. My mess. I used to think love meant being adored, pursued, seen. But now I know, it also means being held accountable. Being known fully even in the ugly moments. And I had denied Reed that. I'd let him love a version of me I kept polished and presentable, while burying all the parts that were bored, reckless, unsatisfied. And now that I've lost him, I tell myself I'm better off. That he was too good, too safe. That his routine would have killed me slowly. But the truth is, I don't miss Dion. I don't miss the thrill. I don't even miss the lies. I miss the way Reed used to look at me like I was his whole future. I see it now. He didn't leave because he didn't care. He left because he finally saw me for who I really was, and realized he deserved someone who didn't need to destroy love just to feel alive. And the worst part? I think he's right.